start.
All right. Hello and welcome to our Get Connected webinar. Today, we are going to talk about how volunteer leaders can solve their greatest challenges by building community partnerships. And thank you for joining us. My name is Court, and I work here at Get Connected by Galaxy Digital, and I get the joy of doing creative communications and outreach. So get to collaborate to create these community-wide events for volunteer leaders, to have really important discussions about what's going on in the world of volunteerism right now and how we can meet those challenges with solutions. So if you're not familiar with who we are, Get Connected is our best-in-class volunteer management software, and we serve thousands of organizations across North America. And our software, Get Connected, is designed specifically to meet the needs of volunteer managers, volunteer organizers, and their volunteer programs. And today we have our panel featuring Elizabeth Donovan, who is the head of our Get Connected network team. Elizabeth brings her years of experience working with nonprofits as well as state organizations to implement tools that support sustainable programming. And Elizabeth is responsible for connecting communities through technology and relationships. So thanks, Elizabeth, for being here. And we're so excited to have our guest panelist today, Katie Walsh. Katie is the program director at Hands-On Twin Cities, where she leads the nonprofit membership program and delivery of services to hands-on members and nonprofit partners. In this role, Katie develops strategies and partnerships that help nonprofits build capacity through volunteer engagement. She also manages the Searchable Volunteer Opportunity Database and supports other nonprofit capacity building initiatives. At Hands-On Twin Cities, the focus is on helping nonprofits to increase capacity by working as an extension of their staff, increasing their ability to offer meaningful volunteer experiences to more effectively deliver on their mission. And Hands-On remains the essential source of volunteerism in the Twin Cities as the oldest surviving and thriving volunteer center in the country, celebrating 104 years of volunteering services and leadership. So we're thrilled to have Katie with us today to talk about building community partnerships. I'm also excited to have our Get Connected Success Team Manager, Mai Price, who brings her years of experience in volunteer management and development to work with organizations all over North America in cultivating processes that put community first. So Maya is going to be running our chat box, making sure that all of the questions kind of get pitched over here to the panel. Maya also has great insights as well from her years of experience in volunteer management. And we'll all work together to create a really respectful, uplifting space. Just knowing that, some folks are here who bring many years of experience and some folks are brand new to volunteer management, and we've got everything in between. And so we really just want to work together to create a community environment where ideas can be shared. And everyone can leave today feeling really uplifted and have, some key takeaways that can really support you and your unique program needs. So with that, I'll go ahead and I'll start the slideshow.
Very relevant. Crystal was just sharing she's 5 months in. So yeah, we'll have some good, how do we address this as we go?
All right, so how volunteer leaders can solve the greatest challenges through community partnerships. So today, here is what we are going to cover. What types of community partnerships work best for volunteer organizations? We'll go over some of the benefits and challenges of developing community partnerships. Plus, we'll talk about practical tips and resources for solving challenges with strategic partnerships. And I always say, if you can find just one really great takeaway for you today, that's the key. So be on the hunt for what's going to be best for you. So stay to the end for those practical tips on building community partnerships. And we'll also talk about what are these greatest challenges and which specific types of partnerships can solve these problems, and what are the tools and processes that are going to make partnerships more effective for your program. Elizabeth, I'll go ahead and pitch it over to you to talk about, what is a community partnership? And then we'll let Katie share a little bit about how they do that in their community. So go ahead and take it away.
Absolutely. And everyone, you don't have to scramble if you are trying to eat lunch. We will be sharing this deck out next week with the full recording. So feel free to look as you go. And as Court said, put down those highlights, those keys as you hear them that you want to dive into further. What is community partnership? So by definition, looking at community partnerships for volunteer programs are reciprocal relationships where a volunteer program is receiving necessary support. Plus, partners are able to become a part of that organization's mission, very symbiotic. So through giving time, resources, skilled volunteerism, and cause plus program promotion, partners are engaging in meeting vital community needs with volunteer programs and building lasting community partnerships for your volunteer program allows that relationship plus the participation to grow and deepen over time. So the community benefits through a sustained commitment to your cause. Very, very holistic approach to start with definition wise. I don't know, Katie, if there's certain elements of that you're like, when we think about how we're going to capacity build, where do we go first? Because I think that part of being, central to your role, defining it too for us, for those who are newer, a lot of grants will ask for capacity building. So if you can define that as well as how you hone in on community partnerships, that maybe will be a nice place for us to start.
Yes, well, first of all, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to have this conversation with you today. And when I look at this definition, really the key things that stick out to me is that reciprocal piece. A successful partnership really has to be a give and take, mutually beneficial, and also meet vital community needs, as it says here. The other piece too that I think is really important is, again, successful partnerships that we have seen and we've been involved in have deepened with time and have been able to kind of have a ripple effect and that sustainment component. So those are really the key components that I have seen in successful community partnerships. And at Hands On Twin Cities, we have partnerships with all different kinds of organizations and groups. In my role, I'm working with our nonprofit partners primarily. And so I'm always listening and talking with organizations to find out what are their deepest challenges and their most urgent needs. And then I like to call myself a connector. So then I go back to our team to see if there's a way that we can plug them into a program or a service that we offer, or maybe it's develop further a new partnership that we haven't had with an organization before. So we're always looking for ways to support nonprofits. And again, that looks a lot of different ways. Something that we're doing more of is the more individual customized support, where we're doing some consulting work around helping organizations develop their volunteer programs, or having that third party to come in and just even review some of the things that they have pertaining to their volunteer program infrastructure, all of those pieces that we need in place to successfully manage volunteers. And then sort of on the volunteer side of things, we work with a lot of corporate groups in our community. We are very fortunate in the Twin Cities market. We have a lot of large companies who see the value in providing not only funding, but supporting communities through volunteer engagement, again, in a number of ways. And so we are that intermediary where we can connect corporate groups and other groups of volunteers with the nonprofits that we serve. So that's sort of a high level of what we do at Hands On.
Amazing. Thank you. And Maya, let us know if there's any questions or thoughts on this definition of community partnership, or if there's any questions about, specifically how, maybe other organizations can find their local hands-on or things of that nature. Let's talk about some of the challenges. What are like the most common challenges that your nonprofit partners come to you with that you're seeking to solve? Like here's a list, right? And folks can, add in like what kind of challenges are you facing that you're maybe attempting to solve with community partnerships? How do you know what partnerships are going to be good for your organization? That feels like maybe a challenge as well, just knowing who to talk to, how, when, why, so all of those things. And Elizabeth, if you want to speak to some of these too, because I feel like a lot of this is really just determining who are the best potential partners and how to create that relationship.
And I think that, please do, if you all see a couple of numbers here that you're like, ooh, that one's a real big flag for us, drop those numbers in the chat. We'll try to dive deeper into the numbers we see kind of posting up most. But I think, I see two elements that just always are those themes, those trends in here. One is time, and the other really goes back to what Katie started with, like, how do you listen so that you can understand where your matches are, where there is something that needs to be leveled up so you can find that match. Where's the time to invest to see, is there an organization in your community that's serving the role of a volunteer center like Katie does at Hands on Twin Cities? Is there another entity that's acting as that community coordinator, convener that you can plug into to get more exposure, ideas, support for your infrastructure? And then the other side is your partnerships that are external with companies, with groups, clubs, that one-to-many. How do I take a capacity building approach here? Finding that alignment is, again, listening and asking a lot of questions. And I think that's the thing I always have to drive back to, is I have lots of ideas, but until I listen and until I ask the question, I'm assuming that they agree with me. So finding those places that I can just talk to someone and really understand what they're trying to accomplish, going back to that, it has to benefit both. If you're asking, and you're not hearing what they're trying to get out of it, that partnership isn't a partnership, it's a one-time experience. So I think that's the other element I always see here, is how do you identify what's going to help this company move a goal forward that they have, at the same time as fulfilling a need that my nonprofit sees that we really want to get them involved with, and starting to work on a one-to-one. Katie, I don't know if you have any really good illustrated stories of that, where you had to kind of go at it over time and that it changed over time as you really got into that partnership or that relationship with something you were working on.
Yes, and everything you said, Elizabeth, is spot on. I really think it is that communication initially, and really understanding the goals of the partnership, the roles of each of the players in that partnership, and making sure that everyone is clear around the roles and the expectations. So it all just goes back to communication and making sure that you're sharing and clear about each other's goals and needs and resources that they're bringing or needing, and all of that. So that's definitely my number one. Another thing too that, as you were talking, made me think about is, when developing partnerships, something that I have seen that has been really helpful, again, up front, is kind of determining what is the decision-making process for this partnership. So for example, we work with a lot of pro bono volunteers and do a lot of engagements in that realm, anywhere from 8 to 12-week projects to just one-time projects or shorter engagements. And one of the things that we have found that's very critical at the very beginning, when these conversations are starting, is determining, as the project moves along and there's a bump in the road, or there's a question, or a volunteer needs something in order to continue with the project, making sure it's very clear, the decision making, and who do you go to get an answer to this question before you go down this road. So that, to me, is very important as well, is deciding how our decisions going to be made during this process, whether it's an ongoing partnership or a one-time connection. So what else can I say? A lot of times we do, as I said earlier, we work with a lot of corporate groups who are coming to us wanting to do one-time large group engagements. And even though it's that one-time engagement, again, it's still very important, especially scoping out that project, to really determine what is the ultimate goal of this project? What need will be met by this group of volunteers that is coming today to do this work? Because ultimately, we also want to meet the volunteers where they're at and make sure that they have a great experience so that when they go and participate in this event this one day, they can learn about the nonprofit, become aware of the issue and the programs that this organization is meeting in the community, and ideally stay involved with that organization after the fact, whether as an individual volunteer or doing something again with another work group or volunteering with their family. So again, a communication around how are we going to meet this need with this group of people, and then while you have that group of people in front of you, being able to communicate, here are the other needs that we have available at our organization, and we would love to continue to work with you in a variety of ways. So.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I just really am taking away from this a lot is, number one, a tough thing is determining, like, does my organization have the capacity right now to engage in partnership? Because it sounds like there is a lot of communication. You really have to determine, sort of the parameters of a partnership. It's almost like a partnership contract or agreement on some level. Because I think just really clearly defining what we will do, what we can do, what you will do, and who are the people to contact. And so it feels like, maybe if I have a really small volunteer program right now, we're just growing, and this is true for me, we might not be able to engage in a really large partnership yet. But we can start to seed that relationship. We could reach out to a local hands-on or volunteer center to help us have some of the administrative support with navigating the sides of that agreement, because it does feel like, okay, if we're going to do this, this is going to be a lot of intentional communication to make sure that all parties are able to show up well to this, and that the organization program is actually getting the needs met and the volunteers are also having a positive experience. So I just want to make sure, like, is that something that's a part of your process, doing, like almost like a partnership agreement?
Great question, Court. And it depends on the partnership and the level of complexity in whatever the project is, whatever the program is. But I think that whenever that you can have something like that available to talk through, again, it just helps clarify the relationship and the goals and the expectations, as I mentioned earlier. So if it's possible to have something like that, I think it definitely will help guide the process, as well as help to develop that partnership into a deeper engagement, hopefully longer term. I just had a recollection of an organization. This was many years ago. It kind of ties into this a little bit. So they are an organization that works with single mothers with children. They provide all kinds of services for these families, from providing meals to programs to help women become self-sufficient, get training to find employment, learning about financial planning, life skills. So kind of a wraparound services this organization provides. And they initially were working with volunteers to come in and help with sort of hands-on tasks, like helping clean up the garden, doing some meal prep and meal serving, cleaning rooms, helping with some childcare, things like that. But then out of a conversation with some of the volunteers and some of the women in the program, they had indicated they were interested in learning how to cook healthy meals for their families. And there was a local college in their area. And so they reached out to this college and connected with their culinary program. And again, this took several conversations, but ultimately what I thought was really cool is they partnered with this college and had students from the culinary program come over to the organization, work with the mothers side by side, sharing recipes and ways to cook nutritious meals. And that actually grew into, okay, how else can we work with this college that's literally right down the street? And they have other programs there. What other ways can we engage some of the students to help support the mothers that we're serving? So for example, there were some other trainings and workshops they put on around financial planning and budgeting and things like that. So that really grew from sort of your traditional volunteering where volunteers were coming in to help with just various tasks around the organization to this deeper connection with the families that were being served by this organization and ultimately making a deeper impact in the lives of these women as they were rebuilding their lives and hopefully moving on from the program into permanent housing and all of those kinds of things. So again, that just started with a small introductory volunteer opportunity to this great partnership with the local college. So
I think what's really interesting there, Katie, is I was reading through the chat as you spoke, and some of the barriers that we're seeing presented are when there's a disconnect between ethnicity, race, religion. If a volunteer doesn't feel like the place they're being asked to serve is safe, how do we create that safe space? And I think your example is interesting in that sometimes it's not just one partnership, one-to-one. The partnership had to be a middle ground of a university space where the volunteers felt comfortable going, just like the participants felt comfortable going, and thinking outside of that to think, what's the relationship? Because as you said, once I, as a volunteer, can meet that person, so as I'm walking in as a participant, they're working together and building a relationship so that that no longer becomes as scary because you introduce that relationship in a very safe environment where both participants feel safe together. And I think that would be, part of what I'm seeing here when you drive down to all of this, accountability, when a student doesn't show up, the relationship with their academic supervisor, the relationship with their institution, that moment of making sure there is accountability is also relationship driven. Did you have buy-in from their instructor, from their supervisor? Do you have buy-in from the volunteers that this is a place they feel safe walking out of into? If it's not there, they may have shown up and then driven away. Like you have that moment of creating those neutral places. And I don't know if that's the university is the only idea there, but Katie, if there's any others or if in the chat you found a way to bring separate together, I think that's a big piece of this because humans interact with humans really well. It's all the rest of the barriers that tend to make us stay separated, and getting them together to start to work together. That's your first biggest hurdle is how do you meet them on both sides?
Absolutely. And I think you said it, Elizabeth. I think it's really creating that safe place for everyone. And that just involves conversation, listening to people. What do they need? Why aren't they feeling safe? Just having those really open conversations. Something that I hear from organizations on a somewhat regular basis is even within organizations, there is sometimes resistance from staff to work with volunteers. And it could be they just don't have the tools to work with volunteers, or they have never worked with volunteers, or maybe they had one not so great experience with a volunteer and they just kind of wrote them off. And so they aren't perhaps as open to volunteers coming into the organization. Unfortunately, as I said, I still hear that from nonprofits. And so that's another place where there needs to be buy-in within the organization. And that needs to come from the top down and from the bottom up. Everyone needs to agree and understand and value the people that are taking the time out of their schedules to come to our organizations and share their talent and time with us. And so we need to be respectful of that. So I think the buy-in comes from within the organization as well. I don't know if that answered your question, but that what made me think about its internal buy-in as well, and having open conversations with everyone.
Yeah, and something I'd like to just add to that conversation is that building community is, I mean, everyone here knows it's not easy. It's a lot of intentional hard work, in the sense of having conversations that are challenging and holding space for those conversations, is a lot of emotional labor for folks working in this field, especially too with, the different types of organizations and potentially sensitive or marginalized populations. And so just holding space for the fact that it's a lot of effort to truly build community. And it's actually not an easy thing to do, to have really, even people that, we like and get along with really well. Sometimes we have disagreements and learning, how to hold space for that. So I definitely feel like that's a very real challenge that anyone in this field is facing every single day, and figuring out how to open the lines of communication amongst every single stakeholder, and that's going to be also the community served. Clearly, they're a huge part of this equation. So definitely want to honor that this is not an easy challenge to overcome. And it definitely does take every single person every day really committing to it, and learning and growing. I know for me, it's been a big growth edge. So I just want to honor that this is really challenging work for each of us. And thanks for your presence in that. Let's talk a little bit about, what could we hope to achieve with a healthy, thriving community partnership, knowing that it's going to take some intentional planning and effort, and maybe, connecting also with something like a volunteer center in your community. So what could we hope to achieve as an organization with a healthy, thriving community partnership?
Well, I have a few ideas here. I think there's so many benefits, and over the years at Hands-On Twin Cities, I've just seen so many amazing things come out of different types of community partnerships. I just want to touch on again. So when we do large volunteer events with corporate groups, again, that's a great opportunity where if we're volunteering at the nonprofit organization, they have this group of people right there in front of them, and we give them the opportunity. We give them the floor to obviously welcome them to the organization, tell them more about what they do and why they exist, and how the volunteers that day are impacting the mission of the organization. Even if it's just coming to create a community garden or clean up the building outside, whatever it is, every piece is important to the mission of the organization. So nonprofits have that opportunity to share that. And as I said earlier, they also have the opportunity to say, thank you for being here today. This was super helpful. We just don't have the staff to do this. But after today, we would love for you to come back, and here are other ways that you can get involved. And we've seen that time and time again, even from those one-time group opportunities. Oftentimes there is at least one or two or a handful of volunteers that stay connected with that organization because of that one experience. They maybe never heard of the organization before, and now they know, and now they can feel tied and connected and can continue work. And it could be anything. It could be they can start serving on the board of that organization. So lots of opportunities around that. We've also seen, again, kind of some ripple effects. So another example of a recent partnership in the last couple of years is, after the murder of George Floyd in our community, there was obviously a lot going on, and the pandemic, with our community and organizations and increased demand for services and all kinds of things. And one of our community corporate partners reached out to a local community organization and just said, what can we do? How can we help? And they pulled us into that conversation as a connector and intermediary, because we already had relationships with both the corporate and the nonprofit. And we started having conversations. Well, what is your most urgent need right now that, you know, all of these things are happening in our community? And so it started as a pretty in-depth project to help the nonprofit build capacity and infrastructure, because they were seeing a huge demand for increased need in the work that they did. And so this long-term project began, and out of that, then the employees were even more engaged in the work that they did over this 8-week period, that they said, okay, what else can we do? What else do you need? And then a couple other smaller projects came along. And then more employees at the organization heard about all of these different opportunities, and they wanted to get involved. So it just kind of snowballed and into this ripple effect. And then there was also ways that some of those employees could get involved in, like they built a community garden then. So it just snowballed, and the ripple effect was amazing to see. And other companies in our community and nonprofits were seeing this happen. And so that even expanded further to this original corporate group saying, okay, you know, we've supported you. What other organizations need more support? So they still have that relationship with the original nonprofit organization. They do a lot of ongoing work with them, but they expanded to other organizations that they were funding, but maybe weren't doing as much volunteerism with, and have developed stronger relationships with those community nonprofits as well. So again, the benefits of you know, what can happen from a single conversation can really expand to a lot of different ways that can support community needs, urgent community needs.
And Katie, here's a question too. I'm seeing some folks bring up in the chat. How can an organization, through, you know, a day of service or corporate partnership for a big event, potentially continue to nurture that relationship and have those volunteers maybe sign up for a shift on their own and come again? Like, what is a process that an organization could engage in to kind of allow those folks to kind of keep coming back again? How would they do that?
One thing that I've heard a lot of our nonprofits do after those one-time group events is stay in contact. Send an email after the fact. Thank you so much. Here are pictures. You know, we really loved having your group here today. Here are some other urgent needs that we have. So it's staying in contact and making them aware of other ways that they can volunteer. Because if you don't do that, they might not necessarily know what other needs you have in the organization. So even just that, just emailing after the fact, I've seen a lot of organizations get longer term volunteers from that initial one-time opportunity.
And I think for some folks, they might live in a community where there isn't a volunteer center or hands-on or other sort of maybe community grassroots volunteerism focused organization. You know, what other, like, let's talk a little bit about what other types of partnerships organizations can initiate on their own.
I think the first step is just looking in your community, who's around you, what relationships do you already have? So your board members, are they members of congregations? Do they serve on other boards? Do they work for businesses in your community? I would say start there, start with those relationships that you might already have, or at least a connection to, and then you can build out from there. Again, there could be smaller businesses or other organizations in your community, and if you haven't worked together before, if there's no communication, they might not totally understand, or they might think they know what you do, but they don't actually know exactly what you do. And so therefore, how would they know how to partner together? So I would say look initially in your immediate community to see who's around and just start making some of those introductory conversations. Or again, if you know some of your volunteers or your board members who have connections, leverage some of those connections. One thing that, again, this is another example of a really cool partnership that I learned about a few years ago. A large homeless shelter in downtown Minneapolis. They offer training to the volunteers when they first onboard them, and at the time it was some significant training. I can't remember how many hours, but they had to go through a specific training, trauma-informed care, that kind of information, and all volunteers had to go through that. And there was another organization nearby that sort of did the same thing, offered the same kind of training. And they decided, well, can we do this together? And so the larger organization was able to send some of their volunteers over to the other organization for the training because they offered it more often, and vice versa. And so it just was a win-win for everybody. So I just thought that was a really cool partnership that, again, came out of a conversation. Somehow they learned that this other organization was doing the same training for their volunteers and thought, well, let's help support each other, because again, the challenge I think that we talked about earlier is staff capacity in our organizations, what we have time to do. So
yeah, I think that's so interesting. I recently was at a meeting where they were talking about it was a homeless center for humans that was getting a lot of mixed messages because people thought it was a homeless for animals. And I kept thinking about it after the fact, where I thought they are, if a family is displaced, there are not only animals, there are humans. So to your point, like, what is happening that's falling in your lap sometimes that instead of redirecting, you're realizing there's a theme here where there's probably two organizations that could come together to partner for capacity building between the two. I think we're getting some really good questions about how you work with organizations to show them the value. And I think this goes back to some of the other webinars Court has put together, but that is that moment of the value may not be the task of the day. It may not be the value of getting those 100 boxes of food packed. That has to happen, but the value of the volunteer incorporation inside your building, inside that elevator pitch that you're ready with, no matter what the opportunity, it's what is the purpose of that? If the purpose was to pack the 100 boxes, you've got to be very on task. That has to be your primary purpose. And that has to be set up from the start to the finish, that if we don't get this done, we're not going to get these families served. But if it's more to get them on site to understand what you're doing, because maybe you don't use volunteers weekly. Volunteerism is an element, but it's more an introduction than it is a need. Then it's how do you make this one-time experience trickle into some of the things Katie's talking about, where there's these ripple effects of now you have an advocate that understands your cause, so that maybe more people who need your services are sent your way because they now know it's provided in the community. Is it getting into that moment of realizing that this, alumni from this organization care about this cause? How do I find out where those alumni are out throughout my community, so that I can, just like Katie said, with board members and groups that they're a part of, you start trickling out who knows about what you do and asking them for more. There's just it's a beauty to asking. And I think that part is so hard, but it's also something that can change on a dime. I was told by a neighbor recently that their nonprofit got a very large funding source from a local company. And it was simply because that local company was told by their tax advisor, hey, we've hit a point where you have to start donating because of where you're at in your company's growth. Had they asked the year before, wouldn't have been on the radar. That year, they were like, oh, we need to invest back into the community. How do we do this in such a way that we can pair a company programs so that our company employees feel tied to a cause, and also pair some of our funding with it, because we have to start giving back. So let's make it a real program that this is what we're about. This is the cause that aligns with our company's goals. let's get in there, kind of similar to what you were saying, Katie. When they have that moment as a company, making sure that you can show this is my impact. Question of how do you show it? It can't just be your state rate of volunteerism. Every hour equals this much time, equals this many dollars. It could be as simple as that. It could be the impact as a measurable. We fed 1,000 more families this month than last month because we had your support driving forward the volume of what we needed to get accomplished. So I think it's always thinking in human. What is it that's going to make that volunteer understand what you do and also feel like they were a part of it, and that you relayed back what was the outcome? What was it we accomplished because we had your support? Without you, we're not going to be able to do that next month. That's so critical to make sure they realize I have to keep or find someone else who's aligned that I can send in my place.
Yeah, just one thing I want to add quickly to your point, Elizabeth, of just ask. I mean, what's the worst that you could hear? I had a meeting with some of our member organizations last week, and we were talking about this a little bit. And one of the gentlemen that was there, he's the newer volunteer manager at an organization, and he just started looking at who their corporate partners were and reached out to some of them and literally just asked, what else do you want to do? How else can we work together? And in some cases, they said, well, we need a second, let's think about it. Some other cases, they had ideas right away. So why not ask? You never know what can come out of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm seeing a lot of talk in the chat about, using technology or not having access to technology. We have some great resources on our blog about marketing your volunteer opportunities, communicating impact, using social media, newsletters. There's a lot of tools that you can use. And also, if you have an email list, you can send folks a YouTube video. So you don't actually have to host a video anywhere. You can use YouTube for free and send out short videos. I also really love Canva if you need to do some free designs. But there's a lot of resources on our blog that can help with storytelling, getting the word out, and really understanding, how to communicate with prospective partners and volunteers. We have a lot of resources on that. Yeah, YouTube video is great because it's accessible anywhere. People can look at it on their phone too. A lot of folks look at things on their phones versus a computer. But one of the things that we do specialize in is really trying to, allow technology to support relationship building. So I know that one of the primary ways that Hands-On Twin Cities, actually works with partners is through opportunity posting. Katie, can you tell us a little bit about that here?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have been using Get Connected for, 7-8 years now, and it's just very easy for nonprofits to be able to post their volunteer opportunity. So I manage the system. I'm kind of the help desk with organizations when they first learn about us and get registered on our site, and help them navigate and maximize the system so that they're attracting the types of volunteers that will really fit what they're needing to do. And so it's been a great tool to not only promote opportunities into the community and recruit volunteers, but then on the back end to be able to have some of those volunteer management tools where you can have information collected about your volunteers, the hours, information specifically about the volunteers, being able to communicate with them, remind them of things coming up. So it's been a great tool for us in the Volunteer Center. We have over 700 nonprofits that use our system to, again, put the word out there about all of the different ways that people get involved. So yes, in your community, if you have a volunteer center or a hands-on or united way to connect with, I would encourage that if you can. But definitely utilizing other tools, as Bart talked about, social media and YouTube. And you said it, Court, storytelling, I think is huge. So it's more than the numbers, but it's what is the ultimate impact of of all of this great volunteer time that's taking place? What is it actually truly doing for our community and the organizations?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I got to tell you, I connect to story, I connect to people more than I do numbers. I'm like numbers, yeah, that's great. That's not what does it for me, but like some people, it's all about the numbers. They want to see that, and
Yep.
different people have different things that motivate them. We have a couple of articles on our blog about that, how to communicate impact to volunteers. And a lot of the storytelling, under the social media articles, smart social media campaigns for your volunteer program, like we talk about what it means to educate, inspire, and invite people to your mission and to your organization. So I hope that we've answered that question well, but these are some screenshots of the Hands-On Twin Cities Get Connected site, and a lot of nonprofit partners are posting their opportunities on your site. And also some, nonprofits have their own Get Connected tool. We've got tools for all different organizations. So we'll make sure to drop a link in there. Maya will drop the link of how to contact us if you're interested in learning more about our volunteer management solutions. But
I think
one of the
before
things,
you go to that, the one thing I did want to say, we talked about this earlier this week. And if you go back a slide, I think what was really interesting with this slide too, and I was telling Katie to pick on her organization, they're a larger organization, and you've been doing this a bit, 8-10 years myself. And I think when we started working with Katie with Get Connected, they didn't have a website. They used, and what I want to kind of drill home the point, they used a catcher's mitt. They used something where you can respond, as where all these stories that Court just talked about, the social media, all of that effort, it's got to land somewhere, because all of those are trying to catch the eye and the attention of someone, whether it's, I think I was poking around your site earlier this week and it was like project in a box. If I want to be virtual and not there's project in a box. You had a community Juneteenth celebration that is coming together. You've got virtual, you've got spring and summer, time matters, spring and summer, what can I do? So those moments of you're catching their eye, if it doesn't land where you are able to find out who was interested, they're on to the next post, they're on to the next social media, they've moved on 2 minutes later. So every time you've got to, whether it is just your email where they can contact you to say, I'm interested in this thing I'm seeing, whether it's your website, or in this case, a large organization they have a website now. There are purposes for websites, but I will say when they started, they wanted to catch and know who was interested in them, because that was their number one goal, to drive people forward to be engaged with the nonprofits they were representing or the programs you're representing. So think about that. How do I make sure I don't have the best story ever? They read it, they were excited, and they don't see how to learn more or do something more. That is so critical. So sorry, wanted to make sure we made that point today, because I think there's so much you can try. And if you're trying it all, if it doesn't land somewhere where you see the results of what's working and what's not, then we all only have so much time. We want you to make really good use of that time.
Yeah, and kind of having, if you've got a story, you want to have it connected to a call to action, and, having a way for people to sign up quickly, or to catch their email and to see what they're interested in quickly is great, because you want to take that momentum and you want to foray it into building a bridge to a relationship. Just like in thinking about thriving community partnership, it's like, how do we have our framework in a proactive way so that when we start these conversations, we've got what we need to be able to sort of create that both-sided, relationship where we're, sometimes I was chatting with some volunteer leaders this week. It's like, sometimes it's knowing what to say no to, but when you're really well planned in your framework, it's easy to say, well, we can't do that because this is our mission. This is who we serve. This is how we serve them. And this is why we do it. But here's what we could do with you. And I think, having this framework is what empowers you to have those conversations really confidently. At least, for me, I've seen that to be true. So I just want to kind of dive into this little portion here. Katie, I know the other day you said this was sort of, the bread and butter portion of what does this really take to make it, something that's a relationship that's building with momentum, and it's thriving, it's growing, and it's maybe changing and deepening over time.
Yeah, Court, I love what you just said. Having a framework like this empowers you to be able to have these conversations. And me personally, I love things like this where I have a little bit of structure that I can follow. And, you know, if maybe a conversation isn't quite going right, or maybe even a partnership is maybe running its course and it's time to, okay, let's come back, let's reevaluate, let's see if we can realign on this partnership. Do we need to identify new goals? Do we need to look at other resources to add to this partnership? So I really love how this is laid out in these almost steps and things to think about as you're talking with people and you're, you know, you putting processes in place within your organization to make sure that you are maximizing the partnership, but also continuing to build that relationship and continuing to look for ways to expand it. So, as I said before, this framework just hits it all. And even looking at G, so again, sharing outcomes and appreciation. So that's the storytelling piece that we were just talking about. So I feel like these are really concrete steps that people can take and also go back to when needed. So thank you for putting this together. This is amazing.
Yeah, and this will be included in some follow-up resources that I'll send out to you. Everyone who registered next Tuesday, you're going to get a planning guide, and it's going to help you kind of move through these 3 points here, just evaluating your program's challenges that you're hoping to solve with community partnerships, creating your program's framework for engaging with community partnerships. We've talked about that a lot today, and cultivating these processes that are going to help you, you know, reach out to partners and also grow current partnerships. It's also going to have a version of this previous slide that is fully filled out for you, and a blank one for you to be able to sort of fill in some things for yourself too. So yeah, we're going to take just these final minutes that we have here together. I want to make sure that everyone knows we're going to do this again next month. We're going to have another webinar. We're going to talk about recruitment and retention amidst changing community needs. So Maya's going to drop that in. We want you to come back. These hours go by so quickly. I could probably spend all day talking to every one of you here because this is exciting to be with you. And we just also want you to know that we support volunteer organizations of all types, all sizes with technology solutions. So if you want to learn more about Get Connected and what we do to support 50,000 nonprofits and 2 million volunteers all over North America, please reach out to us with the info that Maya dropped in. And we'll just take these last few minutes here to take some questions. So what questions do you have for Katie? What questions do you have about partnerships? Is there any one takeaway that really, you know, feels like it could work for you at your organization? We really want to hear from you in these last few minutes. Thank you so much. Is there anything else too that our panel, you know, Katie and Elizabeth, that you'd like to share additionally, like any anecdotal stories or things from your experience that kind of came up while we were chatting today?
I liked a little of what you shared, Katie, if you're able to share more about, it's a new initiative that Hands on Twin Cities have for the Pro Bono Advisory Board. So the idea of how do you help a nonprofit get that step forward, maybe because they haven't gotten their liability waiver figured out. From a single cause nonprofit approach, I'm thinking like, how do you get that expertise? Like who do you approach? You know, would you call up a law firm? Like how would you go about sourcing what you've been able to pull together in that advisory seat?
Yes, absolutely. So our advisory program, Pro Bono Advisory Program, really expanded after the pandemic because it was an easy way to connect to volunteers with specific skill sets and expertise and education in an area to nonprofits that weren't meeting them, because again, we were seeing a demand in services and support to help build capacity and infrastructure with organizations. And so we really connect our nonprofits to pro bono volunteers in a number of ways. We host Connected for Change days 4 times a year. Each day has a theme, HR, marketing, technology, and finance are the days that we're doing this year. And honestly, we reach out to all of our corporate partners, past volunteers from those events, and just put a call out. It's on our website. So any community volunteer with those types of skills are welcome to participate in those days. And then we do have some customized pro bono programs where a company will come to us directly and they want us to help develop their pro bono program internally and help their employees engage in pro bono type projects and opportunities. And so then we just work with them directly to put together projects, connect them with nonprofits based on, again, what the skill sets they're coming with and the organizations that are needing those skills. So it's a combination of relationships we already have with corporate partners, but then also inviting the community to participate in any of these ways with the specific skill sets and expertise that they have.
I love that too, from just one to many, because if you know, as we talked here, if you're in an area that doesn't have that coordination, if 10 nonprofits all need this resource, being able to speak to companies to say, hey, we have this need, you know, we have this space. If we can all come together and have 4 tables that are going to topic on those 4 topics, we need a leader at each table to help us, you know. And that's, I think, you know, if you kind of view from their eye, give to get, like, what is that company looking for? That media exposure, that story about what they're providing back to the community because they have this expertise in how they're helping the nonprofit community. Telling that story is so important, along with just getting the help you actually need to be able to expand your capacity. I think those are hand in hand every time. How do I see it? How do they see it? How do the participants see it? How do the volunteers see it? And making sure that experience hits all the markers. I think that's the wisest thing I'm taking out of it for my key takeaway. But yeah, I love that everything you've shared. Thank you so much, Katie.
Yeah, and you can check out Hands on Twin Cities. Maya dropped the website in the chat, and we'll also have links to Hands on Twin Cities website, as well as their volunteer portal website that they've got through Get Connected. And we'll share all of these bonus resources. We really hope to see you again next month. These hours go by so quickly, and we look forward to them all month. And I really want to give a huge thank you to Katie Walsh and Hands on Twin Cities for being with us here today. I know it's a busy season for you all and in the work that you're doing in your community. And just want to say thank you for sharing from your experience and, you know, knowing that, you know, partnerships are a type of relationship. And it takes time and intention to build that. And so just really always want to be super honest about that, but also, you know, helpful and hopeful, and seeing that maybe there's some ways that we can work together to, you know, to come up with creative ideas and brainstorm together to see how we can make these sorts of relationships be really beneficial and uplifting for everyone involved. So I'm thankful for that. Thank you so much for coming. Is there anything else anyone wants to say? We've got 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
I just have one other last thought.
Yeah.
As we were kind of talking about just, you know, things to keep in mind. The word flexibility comes to mind to me. I mean, if anything, we all realized after the pandemic, during the pandemic, that flexibility is sort of key. So, you know, with any relationship, partnership, I think that's a part of it too. So I just wanted to say it. But I also just want to thank you all so much for and Elizabeth and Maya for inviting me and engaging me in this conversation. And thanks to everybody that participated. I was really happy to be here. So thank you again.
Thanks,
Amazing.
everybody.
Yes, we're thrilled to have you. And just thanks to everyone who is a part of our Get Connected network for showing up today, being a part of the conversation. And again, if you haven't heard of us before, we're Get Connected by Galaxy Digital, and we create volunteer management solutions for organizations of all types, program sizes, and budgets. And you can reach out to us to learn more about that at galaxydigital.com. and we will end right on time, and I'll be sending out the recording and all of the bonus resources on Tuesday morning. So thank you so much for being here. And thanks to Maya for managing our chat and for everyone's participation. And we will see you in June for recruitment and retention. And we'll be talking to Cody Jang and Erica Alvarez from San Francisco Marin Food Bank. And we'll be talking about how they met big community needs amidst a lot of change in their community. So yes, we hope to see you then. Until then, take care, and thank you for all of the work that you are doing in your communities every day. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.